Welcome to CSL Podcast. Here you delve deeper into the field of cyberscience through enlightening discussions with leading professionals. I'm Wilma, your host for today's episode. Over the past decade, the farm sector has rapidly adopted cutting-edge technology to enhance efficiency, address climate change, and mitigate biodiversity loss. However, as these production processes become more advanced and automated, they become more vulnerable to cyber threats. Without proactive cybersecurity measures, the risk to farms and agriculture operations continues to grow. In this series of episodes, we will explore the most common cyber attacks, their devastating consequences, and talk about some essential strategies for prevention and protection, featuring insights from our special guests. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Janos Botschner. Dr. Janos is a social scientist with extensive expertise in applied research, evaluation, and strategy consulting across various fields. He is the lead for the Cybersecurity in Canadian Agriculture Initiative, founded by the Government of Canada and conducted through the Community Safety Knowledge Alliance. Dr. Janos' professional work covers issues related to collaborative public safety and well-being, focusing on understanding and responding adaptively to the complex issues and emerging opportunities of today's world. With a deep connection to the agriculture sector through his family's long history in farming and manufacturing, Dr. Janos brings a wealth of knowledge to our discussion. Thank you for joining us today.
My great pleasure, Wilma. It's very nice to be with you and your audience today.
Thank you. So, for us to start, could you introduce yourself and share a bit about your background and your current role?
Well, you provided a very nice intro, so I'll be brief. My training is not in technology, engineering, or computer science. It's in applied social psychology. And so what I've really tried to do with this project is bring a bit of a human-centered perspective on the challenges of cybersecurity across the food system. I come at that because, well, I love food. And as you mentioned in your intro, my wife's family has been farming in Ontario for over 160 years. And on my side of the family, we also have some significant background in value-added food production as well as manufacturing using agricultural outputs that go back many generations in Europe as well. So I'm very interested in understanding how we can support farm businesses to be successful and sustainable. As someone with a background in community mental health as well, I'm very interested in how we can support farm families and rural communities to be as adaptive and healthy as possible, given some of the many challenges that we might talk about today. My own career is really focused on supporting communities and our society to be more adaptive and resilient and prosperous. And I feel that we can do that when we tackle things like how we can help our communities and our society to be healthy, safe, supportive, and inclusive, as well as innovative. This is an important problem because it touches on all of those in a variety of different ways in the midst of a transformative change in how we produce and distribute food. So it's been a real pleasure and an honor to work on this topic because I think it touches on many of the big issues that we're trying to grapple with in today's world.
From your perspective, this human perspective, what are the main challenges that the agri-food sector faces in terms of this cybersecurity threat?
Well, I think the first one is one of awareness. You had a very good conversation with my friend and collaborator Evan Fraser not so long ago, so I'll try not to repeat what Evan said. But I think the awareness piece is where we have to start. And there are a couple of things that relate to that. Number one, um, there's been a bit of an important shift I'd say in the last year or two in terms of conversations within the ag food sector around cybersecurity. More and more primary producers and others are becoming aware of events that have affected people they know, near misses that they've experienced, or in some cases, actual malicious cyber attacks that they've had to manage through. there's also a much bigger picture related to the broader global environment that people are becoming more aware of when we think about the weaponization of food security as one example. But of course, there are many others, climate change, etc. As technology becomes more widespread, it's going to give rise to new opportunities and new challenges. And producers are very much lifelong learners. They know how to manage risk, and they understand the importance of carefully assessing and making decisions around the adoption of new tools and technologies. So I always say this is a new environment we've entered, but some of the kinds of decisions that have to be made are not that different from the kinds of decisions that producers have always had to make, as well as other people in the food value chain. So it starts with awareness, but you can be aware of something and not necessarily see it as a priority. So it's also important for people to understand that this is something that should be a new best management practice in food production and across, the food value chain. But again, if it's a priority and you don't know what to do about it, you don't know who to turn to or what to do next, you're not going to do anything. You also have to understand that this is a business enabler as well as a key opportunity to manage an important category of business risk. So there are a bunch of different layers of this issue that, if they're addressed carefully and collaboratively, can really help producers and others to start to think together about where they can make perhaps small changes today and small changes tomorrow, but be in a much stronger position in terms of preparedness, security, and resilience a little bit down the road. So I would say that awareness and related issues are still a very important challenge. And then a related challenge is, joined up effort or collaboration, because this problem is bigger than any one category of stakeholder. It takes everyone to understand all of its details and to start to join up their efforts to create what I call network capacity to be able to make things better.
Well, as you said, understanding these challenges help us realize the critical importance of thinking about cybersecurity to this critical point. And let's talk about these potential consequences of
Mm.
cyber attacks in agri-food systems. How could this impact food security and supply chains from your point of view?
Well, it's really important to recognize, number one, our food system is a critical infrastructure. It's a critical infrastructure for a reason. It contributes to the well-being and sustainability of individual businesses. It contributes to regional prosperity, and certainly at a national level, it contributes significantly to Canada's economy in terms of its global position as a trusted trade partner, as well as a provider of global or contributor to global food security. I think also we all know that we get a little bit grumpy, if not very concerned, if we can't put food on the table. So if they're for those who are uh, have a reasonable degree of food security to start with, if there's a threat to their capacity to access the kinds of food they want in order to be able to provide for their families, significant concern spikes. For those who are already challenged related to food security, you could imagine some significant impacts on their well-being, both from the standpoint of stress, mental health, as well as capacity to ensure adequate support for healthy development for children, and the list goes on. So, food security is big, and of course, food security, if it's not addressed well, can contribute to a breakdown in social cohesion, trust in our public institutions, and in a worst case scenario, social unrest. So those are important things. Ag and food are also at the intersection of a number of other critical infrastructures. And so what happens when we're talking about significant cyber incidents affecting a critical infrastructure is you can start to have knock-on effects, and you can have cascading implications that can be potentially more damaging than the initial incident itself. Think of a pebble in the water or a rock in a small pond. The splash is one thing, but the ripples and what the ripples hit can be another thing. So we have to be, I think, thinking about the entire ecosystem that is ag food, as well as the other critical infrastructures that connect to it, and understand that if too many significant things start to happen, the capacity to respond effectively to all of them is going to be challenged. So we have to think about not just preparedness and resilience and security, but also resilience. How can we manage through a bigger kind of disruption, and who plays what kind of role in order to be able to do that well and take steps to prepare for that?
Addressing this potential impact is crucial for maintaining the integrity of our food systems. And this conversation is important because we need to highlight how vulnerable and how the consequences is going to have different stages. So, my next question is I would like to ask you about this preventing measures that we can take. So, how important is, for example, employee training, or what others initiatives would you suggest?
Yeah, super important. And, at very minimum, as I said earlier, it's part of awareness building. But beyond that, uh, I like to think of, what we can do to create a culture of safety, and a culture of prevention if we can, and a culture of being ready to respond effectively if something happens. We see this all the time. It looks like it's going to rain outside, we might bring a raincoat or an umbrella. If we live in a home, we're going to be paying attention to the weather forecast in case it snows and get ready to shovel or do whatever we need to do. If we're going to go on a long car trip during the winter time, it's probably wise to have certain supplies in the car so that we're prepared in case we get stuck. So these are lots of things we do all the time anyway. So staying aware and knowing a little bit about what you can do to be in a better position if something happens is always a good idea. Now, in the case of education and training, it's very interesting. We've sketched out the elements of what we think is the first sector-specific cybersecurity framework focusing on ag food. There are four pillars of that framework. One of them is workforce capacity development, and we've kind of broken that down to a few pieces. In the first place, certainly, if you're a business owner, whether you're a small or medium business or a very large corporate entity, it makes sense and it's a best practice to provide an appropriate level of training on cybersecurity for your team, whether that team is you and your spouse or whether that's a team of thousands of employees. Basic cybersecurity training makes good sense, so it's the right thing to do. The other thing, though, is in the case of producers, they're very busy. They usually don't have a cybersecurity or an IT team at the ready. So among the various things we've done, and others have done this in different ways as well, is to develop producer-centered training tools to help them get up to speed in some manageable ways that they can build on over time to enhance their cybersecurity preparedness. But we can do more than that. The obvious answer is people who are entering the field of ag food should have a basic level of training about cybersecurity. So they've developed their digital acuity and their acuity for cybersecurity issues and ways of addressing or mitigating those issues. There's also another piece, which is people entering the field of cybersecurity should know something about agri-food. Agri-food is a fantastic career, as you know, for many, and it's my feeling that there could be a number of people graduating from cybersecurity programs who would love to work in the agri-food sector, making a big difference to the lives of Canadians as well as people who enjoy Canada's quality food exports around the world. So that's a great opportunity. There's absolutely a place for education and training, and the more we can stimulate knowledge and stimulate constructive practice change, the better we'll be together.
Of course, we seek for these professionals, and you talked about collaboration. So let's go through how do you think collaboration between stakeholders, farmers, producers, tech companies, and government agencies can improve cybersecurity measures in agri-food systems?
Well, a couple of ways come to mind right away. The first is this is not a simple problem. It's not a simple opportunity to approach. So we should understand that there are two sides of the coin. One is it's about business risk management, but it's also about business development. So, if you have a good cybersecurity program in place, you can have a better line of sights into operation, and therefore you can better manage your top and bottom line. So, collaborating in understanding and taking steps to enhance both of those kinds of, business functions is very important. Now, the other side of it is because it's a complex issue, no single discipline, no single stakeholder group is going to be able to understand all of its different elements. We need a diversity of perspectives. We need a different experience set to kind of weigh in on this. And these include not just technical disciplines, but also lived experience. So from the perspective of things like food sovereignty, from the perspective of more social scientific concerns like different equity-seeking groups and other members of the community, it's important to bring together a diversity of voices to be able to unpack that complexity and think about from both a functional perspective and a values-based perspective, how can we move forward together? The other side of the coin is this is all about shared risk. So if it's a matter of shared risk, because we're all affected, we really need to think about who can own what part of that risk and how can we collaborate together to try and address that effectively and in a way that makes sense for different stakeholders, as well as being consistent with appropriate roles that they might play. So, for example, governments may have a role to play in terms of incentives for producers who are making practice changes. We can think of things like energy retrofits in our homes. Might there be some kind of a tax credit or incentive program for producers and others who are undertaking cybersecurity enhancements to their businesses? That could be a role for government. In the event of a major cybersecurity operation conducted by a nation state or a major international criminal organization against ag-food as a critical infrastructure, government definitely has a role, and that role could include things like defending forward and disrupting the attacker before the attacker can disrupt us too much. So, there are different roles that different people can play. Others have spoken about the role of insurance. Right now, cyber insurance is, as I understand it, a sort of a loss from the standpoint of a cost center, but insurers understand that there could be a role for them to play. So they're trying to grapple with, well, how can we make this work? And there's some interesting ideas out there. Fundamentally, though, we're going to get smarter if we work together, and we're going to be able to build a more resilient food system if we're not siloed and if we understand where we should be collaborating and what our respective roles are within those kinds of collaborative processes. So collaboration, in my mind, is one of the most important things that we can do because it gets at the heart of resilience. It's helping people get the help they need before they need it or when they need it, and to navigate complex systems in ways that can lead to better outcomes for them and for our communities and our country.
As we approach to the end of our conversation and look into the future, what do you see as the biggest opportunities and challenges for enhancing cybersecurity in agri-food sector?
Well, I think there are some important business challenges. Certainly, when Ali Degantan has spoken very well about this. When service providers and technology vendors are, in a sense, co-locating within an agricultural operation, There's a hazard if they're exposed to one another's data. So we have to think about ways of enabling sort of mixed technological situations work well, and enabling some degree of protection and response capacity, or perhaps idealistically collaboration, uh, when there are, understandable legal and business concerns that go along with responding to something where you might be exposed to someone else's data. The most important thing, though, is talk a lot together, share experiences, insights, struggles, and opportunities. What we didn't talk about today, which is very important, is trying to reduce the stigma of experiencing a cyber incident in your business. It could happen to anybody. There's no shame if it happens. It doesn't mean you're a bad business person. It doesn't mean you're a bad producer. We understand that there are legitimate concerns about reputational risks, but the more that we can tackle stigma, the less people will feel victimized, because one of the things that goes along with being a victim is holding it in yourself and not sharing it with others. So we let the bad guys win more if we hold it in and experience the stress all by ourselves. So reaching out to others can help you to manage the stress too. Um, and then, of course, pulling together to break down silos and look for practical opportunities today and practical opportunities tomorrow to collaborate on some of those issues. And that's really, again, at the heart of building network capacity and system-wide resilience. So those are some of the most important things I would say we should be thinking about. We called our sector cybersecurity framework cyber barn raising to really get at that idea of pulling together to make things better and stronger. The last little thing I would say is pay attention to the possibility that mis or disinformation could also be part of a cyber attack, or be piggybacked on a cyber attack to disrupt our food system or our way of life as a democracy. This isn't something that's often talked about when it comes to cybersecurity, let alone cybersecurity in agriculture. But that what people call that information space is part of how we can think about cyber physical networks, because it gets to human thoughts and behavior. And we know that when people are manipulated through phishing exploits and other kinds of social engineering attacks, they're manipulated by focusing on how we understand something or how we think about something. So, think about what you can do to prepare yourself to be more aware of stuff that could come your way to hurt you, and put together some basic policies that can guide your actions as a business person, and do a little bit of what we call a cyber fire drill. Sit down around the kitchen table or around the boardroom and say, what would we do if X happens? Who would do what, when, and how? And what's our backup plan to make sure that we can move through this incident and not have a catastrophic impact on our business. So those are kind of the top few things that I would suggest we keep in mind if we want to make things more secure and more resilient going forward during this time of really significant transformation in the way our food systems work.
Of course, and we end this conversation with this insight, thoughts, and terms that is so important for us to keep in mind, not just during this conversation, but in our companies, in our business, in our farms. So, Dr. Janos, in the name of the Cyber Science Lab podcast team, I extend our sincere gratitude for joining us today as our guest for this season. It's been a pleasure engaging in this insightful conversation.
The pleasure's all mine, Wilma. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to CSL Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on our social media networks for updates and more exciting content. I'll see you in the next episode.